but suffice to say, that is the end of the Obsidian conquest. And so that happened. So 400 years ago was the fall. 200 years ago is the Sword of Midras. And there's still 200 years between then and the beginning of episode 1. So which I'll come to in a second. So after the withdrawal, shall we say, of the Obsidians, I didn't touch much on that story about the creation of the reformation of creatures throughout the land. So that's our excuse to bring back in elves. That's where our trolls and ogres have come from. They've sort of in previous games, but our new iteration or new interpretation of those. And so a handful of other any new magical creatures we bring in, or any new mythological creatures we bring in, will commonly have come from that source. But in their absence, we now do have a somewhat more unifying fiefdom has come to power, and in particular, it is the Titans and the Oracle. And so I'll talk very loosely about them in this case, because this does have to do with a story that you all will experience. But you probably have played, or you may have played enough of it by now to have heard of the Titans. Have you, by the way, heard of the Titans? Okay, so there is, in Shroud of the Avatar, there's a Titan for truth, a Titan for love, a Titan for courage. These are beings who seem to have come to power somewhat in the time after this book. You may by now know that the Oracle also came into existence somewhere near this time. And I'm sure you've by now talked to the Oracle and had her kind of give you some purposefully mysterious feedback. And if you wonder whether the Oracle is in fact truly in this for virtue or not, that was my intent, and is for that not to feel comfortable to you. So that's on purpose, and I won't tell you exactly why, because that's the first part of the story. But 400 years after the fall, after the rise of the Titans, after the Oracle is brought into existence, shall we say, and after her influence has now spread to some degree around the lands, that's when you all are invited back. And so our game begins. Episode 1 was literally, we actually, in fact, some people, somebody made a lunar rift timer that I posted just the other day. That anyway, if you look at my Twitter feed, you'll see it. But there's one of the community members made a website called the Lunar Rift Chronometer that tells you which rifts will be open to which other destinations, and has a countdown timer in it. And then so actually, if you're going to use that system of gateways to travel around, it's actually a really useful tool. And I talked to them when they sent it to me. I said, "Well, I'm curious how you did that. Is there some data stream in our game that you are using? And by the way, we'd be happy to share it with you, because again, for all of you that are making user tools, if there's a data stream we can share with you, we're happy to do that. But I didn't remember anybody asking about this. So we're like, how in the world did you do it? And he did it by just figuring out the way we did it. And so we actually based it upon real calculations. So in year 1 of Shroud of the Avatar, January 1st of 2013 or 14 is the year 400, is January 1st of the year 400 in Shroud of the Avatar. And every hour that has gone by on Earth since has been one day in New Britannia. And we've just rolled it forward since then, which they figured that out. And then they figured out the math for the planets, which build off of that, and the math with the things for the moons. And so they're figuring out all this horary information. They're actually just figuring it out and building the math independently and running it forward. But also what that means is that if our servers ever do have a hiccup, which they've never had, that we could pick back up where real time is. We wouldn't go back to the gap, so to speak. We would all have a mysterious blackout in our lives for however long the servers are.
Everybody knows that Sebastian's point, Lunar Rift Chronometer posted in the forums, and he tweeted it a few days ago by Artemis.
And so that is the world that you all are brought back into. So you all now have found yourselves in these lands where, one of the first new, uh, first really different things about, either a solo player Ultima of the past or Ultima Online, which had no story, is that all of you are thought of as avatars. There are actually, you'd be not only forgiven, you would be quite literally expecting in Ultimas 4 through 9 that there is only one avatar, and that is you. Blissfully unaware, of course, of your friend next door playing the same game, thinking they're also the one true avatar. And one of the real challenges of this game is how do we bring all of you into the same play space, both give you this customized story experience that we were talking about a little bit in my first session, but also make it okay that you are all avatars from this other world. How, in fact, one of the things just some more JIRAs I was learning today is making sure that people in this, if you were a member of this world and suddenly hundreds and thousands of people from other worlds showed up over a pretty short period of time, you'd be pretty freaked out. And right now our world is a little too unfreaked out that you all are present, in my mind. So we're going to beef that back up here in this polished pass. And and so not only as a storyteller do we need to make sure you feel like I'm having a truly custom experience, or that I am special, or that my journey is not identical to Winfield's, and we're not just solving exactly the same puzzles in exactly the same order and exactly the same results, but that if I do or don't, make a moral dilemma choice in one way or another, the ramifications of my choices don't wash over his, or vice versa. And so that's the technical challenge, but I think we've got that one now well in hand. But then there's also the biggest challenge is, what do we do towards the end of episode 1 to make sure that you all are not railroaded into all now emerging at the end of episode 1 going, well, yeah, we all passed, we're all the same, we all ultimately ended at the same meeting point. And so again, that's another place I can't really talk about much. And in fact, it's going to be one of the trickiest for us to playtest, because well, some of you may notice that you're originally, I'm sure most of you have noticed, we distribute everybody into the truth, love, and courage areas of the world to begin with, but you eventually have to do all 3 of those. But then there's also a finale section. And the finale section is going to be really hard to playtest, because I really want you to see it when it goes live. I don't really want you to see much of it beforehand. And so we're probably going to have to get volunteers or something to come across the line to help debug that finale. And even though we want to have people sign NDAs, but we really want everybody to be quiet for those last few months while we wrap that up, just so it can be a fun, piece for everybody to experience the end. But you'll also notice, another thing to talk about in this too is already in Ultimas we've covered ground of, Ultima 4, virtue's good. Ultima 5. Virtue can be hard to say what it is. Ultima 6, racism. Ultima 7, tolerance for wild beliefs. Excuse me, that was Ultima 8. Ultima 9, individual thought. And so where we're starting here with this is kind of was illustrated, I think, well by some early community events that came out about people's assumption that virtue and chaos were in opposition. Obviously not for you. You understand it correctly. And in that, I really think people should think of it more like the Dungeons and Dragons alignments. Chaotic good is virtuous and chaotic. Chaotic evil would not be. And you can still be, lawful good might be too restrictive for a chaos person, for example, if you think of it as a good autocrat. And so part of the story, which I won't describe in too much detail, is that framework, is the framework that chaos and virtue are in fact not in opposition. And one of the things it's perfectly fine for somebody to come up and say, okay, well, they may not be polar opposites, but still one is more important than the other. And that is a perfectly fine debate. So Star, if we were going to have that debate, I would say what's important in life is virtue. And yes, of course, free will is important. And, compared to a complete lack of free will, of course, free will is important. But if all you're going to do is randomly bump off the walls and destroy things, please do it in a virtuous fashion first. Choose virtue first, and and then Star would argue the other way. Says as soon as you put this moral descriptor around things, that innately will be wrong under certain circumstances, and so therefore, even though I don't have a problem with the general vector of saying it's nice to be good, once you start defining what nice means, you're inevitably going to run afoul of the practical realities of life. And so first choose this independent thinking, and then secondarily maybe be a nice guy about it. And that's a very healthy debate to have, and you'll see that will, well, that is sort of the, reintroducing the principles of truth and love and courage, finding the balance of the importance between individual freedoms and doing, having a code of ethics. That is the discussion you'll see us hopefully playing out with episode 1. And for those that are paying really close attention, there's actually already images and comments in the game that really are, even though I made a very strong case that is still correct, that episode 2 is fundamentally not being worked on. I mean, the framework that Tracy and I put together is still as much work as has been done, period. But there are pieces of that framework are showing up in this game already in episode 1. We're not talking about it much, but there's already little bits of text, there's already little bits of symbology that are scattered in here that we will pick back up again when we get to episode 2. But I don't want to talk about this much other than you leave that as allude to it now just so you'll be paying attention and see what you see. But it'll make a lot more sense when we get to episode 2. So I think that is, I blew right through the first 2 parts of what I've had to say. Now, if you'd like, I'm actually happy to